Hi, I'm Broma,
And I'm Radhika.
and together,
We're Promrad. Before we jump into today's episode, just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to do a little Q&A episode coming up. So send in your questions. You can reach us on Instagram, YouTube, all the things. I think you can, I don't know, can you DM on YouTube? Maybe not. Instagram and TikTok.
you can comment on YouTube and on Spotify.
Let us know anything that you want to know about us, about our past and present as journalists. I don't know. It's
Hmm.
fluid. About our friendship, about the work of doing this job, about TV, like quite literally anything that you want us to talk about. So you can find us on social media at It's Promrad on Instagram. We're at Promrad on TikTok and at Promrad on YouTube as well. Just search Promrad, you will find us.
Yeah, that's not a popular name for a human.
Except someone took Promrad on Instagram, so maybe it is. We hate them,
That
whoever
feels
it is.
targeted. That's probably bullying. So, for today's episode, we are going to talk about the new Netflix Lord of the Flies adaptation. So, this is actually a BBC production. It aired in the UK earlier this year in February. It released on Netflix in May, and it is adapted for television by Jack Thorne, who did Adolescence, which was the big limited series breakout last year. And I think when we were first found out that he was doing this, it was very exciting because clearly he has such a talent for directing children specifically. And it's based on the 1954 novel by William Golding.
That everyone probably, hopefully, read in high school. At least that's where I first encountered it as one of those assigned readings that I actually really liked.
It was one of those books that, the hype reached me first. I'd heard of it
Oh.
and kind of knew the premise before we read it, so I was waiting to read it in school. And then when we finally did, I was like, yes.
There were a few that I distinctly remember. It was this, Animal Farm, and Catcher in the Rye. I mean, they're all classics, but with those, you never know if you're actually going to like them. And I remember reading them being like, oh, I actually really enjoyed that, which was kind of surprising because they're all heavier topics and, especially for that age to be locked in. I was kind of surprised by how much I responded to all of them.
Yeah, and I'm curious what your experiences of just classic literature in general, because I found that a lot of those texts, especially because we read them in school, so it is assigned to an extent, but I didn't love them. The writing style doesn't always work for me because of the way that writing and English language has evolved. I prefer the more modern colloquial stuff anyway, or stuff that was kind of adjacent. I loved F. Scott Fitzgerald, the bit of Hemingway that I read, or Catcher in the Rye, like you mentioned, but a lot of older stuff, which would predate this one anyway, because Lord of the Flies was published in 1954, but a lot of
Oh.
the older pre kind of 20th century stuff I just never really connected to.
Yeah. It's kind of like the way that some of the older cinema I sometimes struggle with as well, because it's similar, it's different sensibilities compared to obviously living in modern times. It's like the way that things are phrased and the way that things are explained even sometimes are harder to grasp. And then you go to something like A Clockwork Orange, which I'm not even sure when that was written, but I had to print out a dictionary because it's written in slang and it's just completely different. But on your note, like a Shakespeare, I really struggled with because that type of English, I probably need a dictionary for that as well. It just doesn't compute in my head. And so even when I watch Shakespeare on stage or the few plays that I have read, I really struggled with them because it didn't really connect to me and I wasn't able to understand the language that was being used. So I think kind of similar boat to you.
Yeah, and obviously I appreciate the role that those texts, the books and films and all have played in shaping modern culture, and that we wouldn't have a lot of what we currently do without that. But sometimes there's a reason that I came up in the current era and got to experience the child or grandchild of a lot of those important pieces instead of the original work sometimes. So sorry, but thank you.
I think that's a good jumping off point of just like these are necessary texts for anyone who is interested in modern day storytelling because I think there's a saying that every story comes from Shakespeare, or like it's like Shakespeare or the Bible are like the two things, but that kind of translates to a lot of these classic novels. And two of our seminal texts are Lost and Yellowjackets, and they both pull so much from this story. I am curious what you thought about Jack Thorne's approach to this because it's not an adaptation that strays very far from the original text. It is very faithful. It's set in the same time period. And each episode kind of follows one of the main characters from the books. And I'm curious how you responded to that setup.
I mean, you mentioned Lost already, which I'm surprised we made it this long without. We made it like 5 minutes without mentioning Lost because I thought of it right away because it opens with literally focused on a solo character waking up in the jungle and getting oriented to the space, which is exactly how Lost opens. And of course, Lord of the Flies came first, but this version didn't. And so we are now in a position where Lord of the Flies can pay homage to Lost, which
Yeah.
drew so much from that originally, and that was really interesting to be in that position. Overall, I was very impressed just because, again, like you need to be able to direct the heck out of children for an adaptation like this, and these kids were phenomenal. There's like four core actors who we will talk about. I'll talk about them right now. The four main actors are Winston Sawyers, David McKenna, Lox Pratt, and Ike Talbot. And each episode is spotlighting one of their characters, mainly in name, honestly. There's a little bit of solo time with each one and a little bit of flashback, but overall the screen time is pretty even within the episodes that are supposed to be about somebody else.
It's like another kind of lost shout out because the flashbacks are really where I would say it's centering on a specific character. But like you said, the stuff on the island is very, the whole company is there. And it's really just, like you said, in name only and in flashback only, which is a very lost technique.
It's just, and to the point where it's become very normalized. I now speak to people who have not seen Lost because
How dare you?
I mean, when Lost was on the air, it was buzzy enough that everyone kind of knew about it or had maybe seen some of it. At this point, 15 years have passed since even the end of that show. So I run into people who have not only not seen an episode, but like maybe not even heard of it, but to whom I have to explain. And I'm always happy to explain this to people, to womansplain Lost to people. And the fact that the modern episodic character-centered flashback episode structure is directly from Lost, including in Yellowjackets. Like that's something that they do all the time.
It was on air while I was in high school, and I will never forget that my honors English 9 teacher used Lost as a way to talk about that type of structure of storytelling, and it really connected things a lot for me and why I'm even in this career, I think, is directly because of that show and that class. But it was so rare and a very unique way of telling the story that, like you said, really started with that show.
It's also made ensemble storytelling so much more accessible to the audience, I think, because even in Orange is the New Black, which is such a huge, sprawling show, which premiered in 2013, so again, like a couple years after Lost ended, and really without that structure to center you on a specific character to anchor you a little bit, it's so much easier, I think, to lose an audience. Week on week, for sure, with that type of release, but episode on episode with a binge like Orange is the New Black, and even in this one.
That kind of leads me to my feeling about the show, which I overall liked it. Wondered a lot of the time if it needed to be as long as it was, because there was a lot of, not filler, but it was just very atmospheric, and you're just spending a lot of time. And I wasn't getting a lot out of that time in those interactions with the characters. I know there have been movie adaptations of Lord of the Flies that I actually have not seen, but I liked the approach of 4 episodes being able to see the devolution of their landing on the island. They have one idea of what civilization should be and then how they devolve into throwing that out the window and having their own rules. I just think 4 hours might have been too long for that, and I was a little bit bored at certain parts. I just don't know that the time spent paid off for me.
It was very stylized. In terms of setting the scene, I was intrigued by that. It's very heavily saturated, the color grading, which looks beautiful. Like, it's very striking in that island setting when you have the bright greens and stuff. But then you get into those sequences that are semi-hallucinated or like kind of dreams or a mix of flashback and present and dream, where some of them are stripped of color completely. The trees are red. They tend to do more and more of the red trees as the story goes on, which serves a pretty clear narrative function, but to your point, I don't know how necessary it was. And sometimes I did find the color grading in particular to be kind of distracting, where it was almost too, like it's too much, it's unnatural.
Yeah, I liked that because I do feel like it set the scene of the eeriness of the island and the eeriness of what's to come of what these boys are going to be capable of doing. But I do agree there was a point where I feel like it got a little bit too much, and there's like a fine line to walk with that. And again, 4 episodes, it's really hammering you over the head with that and those images. So again, not sure if that paid off.
I went to Google how long the boys are on the island in Lord of the Flies, and within 3 words, it auto-completed the question, how long are the boys on the island in Lord of the Flies? This is the question on everyone's minds.
Either that or just AI is already inside of all of us.
Is in my brain. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'd like to think that I'm unpredictable with my Google searches. Gemini says several months, but Goodreads says 2 months at the most. So,
That's much shorter than I thought it would be.
well, that's what I was getting at with the way that the show is structured is you lose your grip on time, which of course you would in that type of situation. And I think intentionally where we're supposed to be like, has it been 2 months? Has it been 3 days? Hard to tell.
I don't know. Yeah. I didn't have an issue with that really. I mean, I wasn't sitting there being like, how
No, no,
long have they been here? But usually I think these types of survivalist shows where someone's on an island, someone is trying to keep track of time.
Yellowjackets gives us the framing of like in the from the first episode, you know that they were there for 19 months, and also they have the seasons. Us kind of at the same thing where the seasons don't change, but every episode you know is kind of like a day or two.
I read this interview that Jack Thorne did with Rolling Stone that I just wanted to quote, and I am curious what your thoughts are on it because obviously I think the most natural comparison is to Adolescence, just given Jack Thorne and the ideas of masculinity being very prevalent in both titles. He thinks about Lord of the Flies as more of a meditation on kindness, and it says it puts kindness before male violence. This is one of his quotes. He says, "One of my favorite scenes in the show is Jack climbing up a steep cliff to try and get a piece of aircraft. Jack becomes paralyzed, terrified, and he's not able to come down. And then Roger comes up after him, and Morris is standing at the bottom, and they're both really concerned for him. These are boys that are capable of monstrous acts, but in that moment, it's this quiet love. They don't talk about it, they are just there for each other. And I think it's really important to show those aspects of Morris and Roger and Jack at the same time as you show them dancing on a boy's body." I I think that's one of the only times we see kindness from them. And I really did not see that vision in this. I actually think it's very much talking about what young boys and people. This is boys in the story. I think it can be extrapolated, and that's what Yellow Jackets does, where it extrapolates that to women. I think it's just that's humanity, unfortunately. I think it's really telling also that at the end of that, Jack is like, let's not tell anyone that this happened. And they don't talk about it ever again.
Yeah.
And it's not really referenced ever again. And I don't think there are more examples of them treating each other that way. So I was really surprised when I read that quote because I was like, I don't think that's what comes across to audiences at all, but I could be wrong.
I'm glad that he found that anchor for himself, but that is a rare take about Lord of the Flies. And to your point, they say they're never going to talk about that moment again, which then plays into not just masculinity, but toxic masculinity of like, yeah, we did have a moment of fear and vulnerability and kindness all wrapped up, which are worth talking about, but we're going to stamp that down. And that is of the time as well as just toxic masculinity through the ages. But the kindness in the show is stamped out in the story. The kindness starts with Ralph and with Nikki, and then it gets slowly just eroded from the entire group. Even the little ones who you see in the beginning are just quiet and, you know, probably missed their parents. By the end, are cheering and raging along with everybody else. So it holds the position it holds in literature for a reason. But also interesting that Thorne brought that up because I'm going to devil's advocate myself a little. The real life Lord of the Flies situation that happened, 1965, so not long after the novel published, was 6 boys in Tonga ran away from home and were shipwrecked on an island. And they lived there for 15 months until they were rescued, and they actually built a really beautiful, peaceful, functional society. And it's interesting that the real life example gets lost quite a bit when Lord of the Flies has stayed so ubiquitous.
And I wish that if that was something that Jack Thorne was trying to signal or hold on to, I don't think that's in the text of the show at all. So if that was his guiding light, I just don't think that he succeeded in telling that part of the story to me. I just thought it was very interesting. Like the whole interview is centered around that being the takeaway from the show. And I think it's much better to read this in the same vein as Adolescence, where it's talking about toxic masculinity, talking about male violence and all those things. Obviously, they're set in very different times and places, but that type of human instinct is what comes through to me for both of those shows.
Yeah, I think the tragedy of it really struck me this time. Parts of the book have stuck with me since I read it, but the tragedy of the boys who are trying, like Ralph is trying to be a good chief and to lead everyone, and Nikki is trying to create a functional society and be kind and appeal to them, or even just trying to hold on to his glasses. My poor baby, his specs. His specs. Oh my god, it's so reflective.
So glary.
I just want to wear specs and protect my eyes on this podcast one day. I have them next to me for my boy. There we
You have
go.
them. We need the source of power and
I
intelligence.
think, yeah, if we need to start a fire, it'll start on my head. Those two key characters are trying to be kind, and even Simon to an extent, who has already maybe learned his lesson that this doesn't get you anywhere with Jack and with his cohort. All of them have some kind of tragic ending. I would say that Ralph's is still a tragic ending because he's very isolated, and having seen as much as we have of Yellowjackets, I'm watching that, looking at him and thinking how much this is going to traumatize him for the rest of his life.
On the note of Ralph, I thought it was really interesting that they cast him as biracial and then kind of didn't explore that at all. And not that you have to always do that, but I think particularly setting it in the 50s made that extremely glaring to me, where I was like, if you're going to do it, I have no problem with you doing it. There needs to maybe be a little bit more
Changes the tenor
entirely. It
of
changes it
every
entirely.
single interaction. He
Yeah.
has the positive ones with Nikki, but then also the negative ones with the other boys. Like, I think there's a comment in an early episode where, yeah, where Jack says something to him where he's kind of like, "Oh, of course you would." Something a little like early on where it seemed to me, or at least it read that like they were alluding to his race because, again, contextually they would.
Yeah, but it's not actually addressed at all. So I think that's a miss for me personally. But I did think all of the actors in the main roles were excellent. This is a really great cast of young actors. You texted me something really funny about.
Okay, some of you listening may know that I am a reformed Harry Potter fan due to J.K. Rowling being a loser. I know that the HBO show is happening and I've kept up enough with it. I really like all the casting stuff that's coming out of that and it's been cool, but it's not just naturally settling into my brain the way it used to. Like, I used to just memorize Harry Potter facts, everything without any effort. They're still deep in there somewhere. So I haven't even like locked in the names of the main actors. I'm watching Lord of the Flies and I was like, this boy playing Jack is so good. I'm like, he's giving Draco Malfoy. He would be a great Draco Malfoy. I can't shake this. And finally I was like, you know, it really is a shame that he's not playing Draco Malfoy because it's already cast. So I go to look up who's playing Draco Malfoy, and it's this guy. It's Lux Pratt. And I do think that's kind of cool because, like, it could have been anyone else on Earth, but it's the same
It
boy
could have
because
been.
he is really, really good at doing at least that one thing. He is magnificent. And I don't really know what my engagement is going to be with the Harry Potter show, but I'm so glad that I got to watch him do that specific thing over here. It's fantastic. And it's also not just like spoiled rich kid, like bratty, any of that. Like, there is nuance to it from the start. Like, he does the anger, the vulnerability, the pain. Like, he's very clearly just like a sad little boy out of his depth. Kind of neither here nor there, but when you were talking about masculinity, he says something to Ralph at one point where he's like, "You can't sing." Because to him, that's who should be leading people, is like the lead boy of the choir. And I was like, yeah, can he sing? Sing a song, Ralph, right now.
Auditions right now. I really thought Lux Pratt channeled the sinisterness. No, not cynicism. Sinisterness. That's a word. Um,
There
right?
should be a noun form of
Yeah,
sin.
it's not cynicism because that's a completely different word. Whatever.
It is sinisterness.
Sinisterism?
Insidious? No.
No. Okay, well, he's very sinister in the show, which is obviously necessary for the Jack character. But again, I'm just echoing what you just said of he is still imbuing him with a softer side. These boys are like 12, so of course he's not purely evil. But I think what the show does succeed in is in those flashbacks giving us a little morsel of here's why they ended up this way. Obviously it's nature, but it's also nurture. And here's their background of their parents' relationship with them and those types of things that I do feel like filling out those details helps a little bit. Again, don't know that it needed to be quite as long, but having those makes you understand the characters more.
So another great performance here. We have David McKenna playing, I refuse to call him Piggy, Nicky. I was genuinely wondering if they would keep that detail, and I understand that it's key to the novel, but it's always made me so uncomfortable. Speaking to your point of casting Ralph as biracial, Nicky is Northern Irish. My cousin's husband is from Belfast, so it was just like instant clock. But that also culturally charges every interaction that the boys are having with him, on top of the other bullying that he's getting.
Again, saying it in 1954 or whatever exact year in the 50s adds those elements. And like, of course, we're not past race or past any of that, but it definitely heightens it. And again, a miss that it's not directly referred to and addressed.
But he's so good. That was one where I really did feel that I'm watching this as someone who is of an acceptable age to be a mother. That's really as lightly as I can word it. Obviously, you see little kids and stuff, and you're like, oh, they're good or they're cute or you want to take care of them. But It was just extra hard watching them be cruel to him and knowing the arc of that character as well. And just episode 4 was when I felt what you did of like, maybe this is too long because I can't do this anymore.
And it's pretty brutal. It's showing the bullying and his eventual fate. I was like, I don't need to see this happen and for as long as the scene goes on.
That's one of the things also that I remember from the novel pretty distinctly was like that chapter and how it went down. And I think it's a little bit different because it's not as drawn out in the novel. It is just like
Pretty quick.
done.
The pig's head, which I know was in the novel, but two shows this year having a talking pig's head was not on my bingo card and not something I needed.
I kept thinking there was a line in playing in my head. I was like, what is that show where they reference it that's like people are fighting and then someone says, I predict that in 5 minutes they'll be at each other's throats with a pig head on a stick. It's Parks and Recreation, season 3, The Fight.
Your favorite episode.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like so stored in there. But the cold open where they're all fighting and it ends with Ron being like, they're gonna have a pig head on a stick. Lord of the Flies coming up in weird ways. I convinced myself in high school that the song 40 Feet by Franz Ferdinand was about Lord of the Flies. I had a case. It could have been stronger, but it wasn't weak exactly.
They're also not the type of band that only sings about one thing, so who
I mean,
knows?
they had a whole song about the assassination of the
If
actual
Franz
Franz
Ferdinand.
Ferdinand. At that time, I thought everything I was reading about in school was a Franz Ferdinand song. And in the case of the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, I was correct. Jury's still out on Lord of the Flies. Could we talk about the soundtrack a little
Yeah.
by our boy Cristobal Tapia de Veer,
Let's go.
fresh off his last stint at the White Lotus, which, if I recall, did not
Did
go
not
well.
end well for him.
But what I really liked about this soundtrack, obviously he's done some like really cool stuff with White Lotus and created tension in a specific setting, like a tropical setting and all of that. But because it was set in the time, the music felt very of the time. I was like, this sounds like music I would hear in a film from the 1950s, if I'm making sense. The very grand orchestral, even the specific orchestration instrumentation of the pieces really evoked that for me. There's a fanfare to it a lot of the time, to the main theme and a couple of the recurring motifs. Is that album out? Because that's some good work music for us.
I literally wrote down frantic orchestral score, especially at the end of episode 2 in my notes, because that's what it was. And of course, music really helps tone in every single show and movie, like that's the purpose of it. But when it hits and it really succeeds in making you feel a certain type of way or like rising your blood pressure when it's supposed to, that's when you know they did the job.
Frantic is a specialty of his for sure. I am curious to see if this gets the same momentum that we saw with Adolescence. It'll be a little different, obviously, because it's an adapted story versus an original. But again, like the young cast are so phenomenal, so many breakout performances, but also it's a little bit more shared, whereas Adolescence was very much just on Owen Cooper.
I kind of think it won't, mainly because of the setting being in the past. I think adolescence people really latched onto it because it was commenting on our very modern hellscape of being online and what that does to people. I think also because Adolescence was a story, it's not based on anything, right? It was a news story. Everyone has read Lord of the Flies and we have seen it in so many different iterations that I just don't know if people are going to flock to it in the same way that they did with Adolescence.
Yeah, I mean, it's arguably not even the most edgy version of this story currently on television. Yellowjackets, final season, coming soon.
Coming soon. It's a rewarding watch, but I don't think I got as much out of it as I did from Adolescence. And partly, for me personally, was the contemporary aspect of it, of adolescence being something that we're currently living through, unfortunately.
Yeah, that also I felt with the themes of kindness when I watched those characters losing their battles. That hit harder in like our modern world for obvious reasons. One thing that between this and Adolescence, I think has been a real 180 for me is my overall like interest in and respect for Jack Thorne as an artist, because I heard of him when he adapted Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which I despised. and it's been great to watch stuff from him that I really like, because I was very skeptical about his writing, because I do think the writing of Cursed Child, like the story and the plot of it, is its weakest point. He co-wrote that too, so it wasn't necessarily who knows which parts came from which specific people, but it's been great to see other work of his and just enjoy it or be impressed by it. That's what artists get to do, is they get to do different things and they get to impress you or irritate you or whatever at any given point.
And Evolve. I'm looking at his filmography. I actually think Adolescence was the first thing of his that I watched because he, like you mentioned, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. He did the Enola Holmes movies and his Dark Materials, and then a mini series called This Is England, but none of which I have seen.
That's interesting because there's quite a bit of adaptation in there, but I think most people would agree that his best work is Adolescence.
Yeah, is the original work that he did. I agree. Yeah, an interesting career. I wonder what he's planning to do next. But yeah, so that's Lord of the Flies. It's a 4 episode miniseries streaming now on Netflix. Let us know what you thought. If you've read the book, what did you think about the adaptation? Were you able to sit through all 4 episodes? Was it too gory for you? Was it too saturated for you?
If so, I would like to recommend these blue light glasses, these specs.
I also have a pair and I wear them a lot. I don't know that they do much for me, but they look cute, so
It might be a
I'm on board.
placebo, but they do help me. Like if I'm staring at a phone or a screen for too long without them. I'm curious everyone else's plane crash TV rankings.
Is that what we should have done for this episode? We'll do another one. Okay, we'll be back next week with another episode. Like, subscribe, comment, share this with everyone you know. Share this to your story, might as well.
Follow it from your Finsta.
All right, bye.
I hate to kill.